Hello folks, if you bought the Epic Edition of The World Within, then for you, the new expansion is going to be launching in just a few days. If not, then it's only just a week away. Either way, this is a great time to take a look at everything that's coming with a bit of a preview and a survival guide. We're all used to staged releases for new expansions, with the seasonal content launching a few weeks after launch, but this time around the staging is going to be even more noticeable. For this video, I'm going to focus in on the pre-season content and timings. I do plan to do a full preview of Season 1 in a couple of weeks, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. No matter when you are starting the expansion, it all begins with the initial leveling up experience. In The World Within, the level cap is increasing from level 70 to level 80, and as always the main focus of that initial leveling experience is the new campaign. The campaign will begin with an introduction that starts in Dalaran. This is a heavily phased linear questline similar to the Warlords of Draenor or Shadowlands introductions. However, it is shorter than either of those and is very fast paced, taking at most 10 to 15 minutes to complete. As well as being far better for the faster pace, the good news is that this will be skippable in alt. On arriving in the first zone, which is the Isle of Dorn, we're initially grounded, but don't worry, this doesn't last very long. After a few quests, which take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to complete, we're whisked off to visit the main city hub, where we immediately gain access to skyriding. But one thing to be aware of is we're not going to be gaining access to steady flight during the level up process. The main campaign is a bit shorter than what we've been used to with Shadowlands and Dragonflight, and it's not on its own enough to get you all the way to level 80. Fortunately, if you like questing, there's more than enough side quests that will be able to fill any gap. Overall, the leveling process will take about 6 to 18 hours depending on playstyle. If you're someone who doesn't go super fast, but maybe also doesn't read through every bit of quest text, I think the average leveling time will probably land somewhere around about the 10-hour mark. The overall questing experience is very similar to BFA's, albeit with a lot more consistent use of voice acting, in that there is a clear storyline, but there's also plenty of smaller local mini stories, and for fans of questing it's going to be a very decent experience. Blizzard have even made use of the new follower dungeon system to better integrate dungeon quests into the story, and if you prefer to go solo or with a friend, you'll be able to use the new follower system for those dungeons. The new zones are very varied. The first zone, the Isle of Dorn, is a traditional above ground zone with plenty of green open spaces. The standout for me though is the new earthen settlements, which in many ways are more dwarfish than the actual dwarf buildings from Vanilla and Cataclysm. Our new expansion hub is Dornagal, which is set in the Isle of Dorn. It's quite extensive in size and feels a lot more like an actual city than did Voldraken. The amenities are a little bit more spread out than in Voldraken, and while it is quite logically laid out, I do think that it may take you a few days to become familiar with where everything is. The rest of the expansion zones are set underground, which I think is quite a brave or maybe even foolhardy decision for Blizzard to make. Zone 2, the Ringing Deeps, is essentially an earthen mining zone, and while it definitely does feel underground, it is a lot more open than were the Zaralik Caverns, and also a lot more varied environmentally. The third zone, Hallowfall, is essentially the star of the whole expansion. While it is underground, Blizzard have put a lot of effort into making it feel a lot more like an above ground space, with a huge underground sea, and the whole area is lit by a massive glowing crystal which occasionally turns into a void phase, giving the zone a kind of a day and night cycle. The highlight of the zone though is the buildings, which are some of the best realised human buildings in game, especially the incredibly intricately designed main inn. This inn is so well done that it's kind of a shame that it's not the main player hub. The final zone, Ashkahet, is the most underground feeling of all the zones, being home to an entire Nerubian civilization, including a very extensive city, albeit one that is almost entirely hostile to us. While the zones are very well designed, I do have one major concern, which is that while we can fly from zone to zone, this is done via either airlocks or cavern passages. It's not a major issue from a practical point of view, but I do worry that over the long term of the expansion, it could cause the zones to feel quite disconnected, something that became an issue with the Shadowlands zones. For those of you who want an alternative to open world questing, the normal dungeons will be available as usual. As has been the case since Shadowlands, dungeons are a little less efficient in terms of XP per hour than is questing, with the exception of the daily bonus from your first random dungeon. Later in the expansion, ways to use the dungeons to power level will likely emerge, but in day one, when the dungeons are still new, they are going to be a bit slower to level with, albeit not so much that if you want a break from questing, you'd be actively hurting your progress. The dungeons themselves follow the trend of Dragonflight with more mechanically complex boss fights, and that will make them feel pretty challenging in your first run through, especially if you're a healer. The other alternative for leveling is a newest feature to be added, Delves. Delves are all 1 to 5 player mini dungeons that are designed to be done in about 10 to 15 minutes. Early in testing they yielded very low levels of XP, but that has now been significantly buffed by Blizzard, and the XP per hour is now on par with dungeons, but with the advantage that you don't need to wait in a queue, as you can even solo them if you want. Delves have 11 difficulty levels, with the first 2 being aimed at leveling. Blizzard haven't shared their unlock plans for Delves, but I do suspect that they may well be limited to those lowest 2 levels during the early access period, with perhaps level 3 opening up when the delayed access kicks in. I personally found the gameplay of Delves to be very enjoyable overall, albeit there are significant differences between the 12 Delves, and there's no doubt that some are better than others. At the time I tested them, the difficulty was a bit unbalanced between them, and I'm hoping that gap is reduced for launch. If you make it to endgame during early access, I do suspect that things might feel a little bit sparse, with Heroic Dungeons not launching until the delayed access on the 26th, and Mythic 0 not until the season launches on September the 10th. Blizzard haven't shared much about the open world unlock, but I have a strong suspicion that the better rewarding options like the open world events may be restricted or even unavailable during early access. One massive question for early access is professions. There has been no official indication that they will be restricted. However, in an early BlizzCon interview, game director Ian Hasekosa did suggest that profession knowledge points might not be available, so your guess is as good as mine. If I get more info on this subject, I will add a pinned comment below with details. What this all means is that for faster levelers, I suspect that early access could feel a bit sparse, especially if you're a very endgame focused player. Early access seems like a bit of a big risk for Blizzard, and it definitely remains to be seen how it will pan out in practice. With the launch of delayed access on the 26th, and things will pick up with the opening of Heroic Dungeons and most likely the level 3 Delves. While it hasn't been confirmed, the Delve system did have indications on the beta that levels 4 and above would not be available until the Season 1 starts. We can also expect to see more of the open world content opening up with the reset on the week of the 26th. The max level open world design is going to feel very familiar to anyone who's played Dragonflight, with world quests on a twice a week rotation along with larger world events being available on regular schedules. The world events include a mixture of the familiar, for example Theatre Troupe is a fusion of time rift mechanics and Ardenweald play activities, but there are also some more novel events, with Awakening the Machine being a kind of cut down Vampire Survivors mode. Renown also makes a return, this time with 4 major new factions, all of which will have 25 Renown levels. One good piece of news is that the max level campaign storyline does not appear to be Renown locked. On beta, the max level campaign was fully unlocked from day 1, and I genuinely hope it stays that way, but I cannot rule out that it will get some form of time gating. For those of you who are mostly focused on preparing for the season launch, one of the main alternatives to dungeon will likely be the usual open world rares. One thing that is for sure is that combined with the novelty factor, the post early access period will offer plenty of stuff to do and explore, and if you do run out of gear to farm, you will be able to unlock Steady Flight by completing the new Lore Master and Exploration achievements. While Pathfinder is back, it is in a very different form to what we've been used to. Along with there being no reputation to farm, it's also available right from day 1. Overall, if you like Dragonflight's open world, then I think you're certainly going to like The War Within. It's very much more of the same. But equally, if you weren't a fan of it, you're probably going to be a bit disappointed. One thing that I think will be quite noticeable for a lot of players is the absence of Mythic 0 dungeons. With the changes in dungeon difficulty, heroic dungeons are effectively replacing Mythic 0, and for the first 2 weeks, these are going to be your main staple along with rares for gearing up. When it comes to gearing up, at level 80, the basic open world gear is at item level 564, with heroic dungeons dropping item level 580 adventurer track gear at the end of dungeon and 593 veteran track gear from the vault. It's not very clear if we will get any crests dropping during the pre-season, but if we do, it may be possible to get from around item level 593 in the pre-season. If we don't see crests dropping, probably 580 to 584 will be a lot more likely. Overall, I think that the pre-season is going to be a bit of a strange mixture of the very familiar and the unfamiliar, with the content mainly being an evolution of that which we saw in Dragonflight, but with some significant changes to rewards and dungeon progression. For me, the launch of a new expansion is one of the best bits of World of Warcraft's experience, and I'm certainly hyped for this one. But what about all of you? Are you hyped for the expansion, or is there something that's worrying you about it all? Let me know in the comments down below. I plan to live stream my initial journey into the new expansion on both YouTube and Twitch if I can make it all work out. If you'd like to join me, I'm going to put my provisional schedule up on screen now. If anything changes, I'll update on social media, so do make sure to drop those a follow. Links are down below, along with a link to my Twitch channel. If you found this video useful or informative, then please do let me know by hitting the like icon. And if you haven't already, then also hit the subscribe button as well. Subscribing is by far the best way to support a channel like mine. I'll be back real soon to cover all the fallout from the release of the new expansion, along with loads more guides, previews and opinions. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.